I also think about how, like, in my practices, something that I do is kind of like flip the script on relativity. I mean, the everybody is a baby with a too big of a brain sort of idea is this flipped on that script of like, like the relative nature of our thought experience, like that is background to what is going on here, which is the experience that's happening. Like experience happens through the happening. That is the isness. That's like when people talk about, be in the flow, be in the here and now, man. Don't think about the future. Fuck off the past. Be here, be now. Like that's what they're talking about is like trust experience, be in experience because experience is experiencing. That's not in a space of relativity. It is through our processes that it turns into a relative space. And what that happens is a sort of like turning of like things that were in the foreground, like what type of person do I want to be, how do I want to function, what I want to do for my work, like how do I want to be perceived by people, all those sort of stuff when you're living in this relative space is very foreground. That's at the forefront of your mind. And experiencing, being in what is happening is at the background. Like that is like it's just like kind of the light little trickle as you're worried about all your bullshit. Flipped around, it's like, oh man, like look at me. I'm a silly weirdo with a beard and long hair and I live at a retreat center. Like, ain't that groovy, baby? But the whole time it's just experience. And I could be sitting here as a hardworking fucking Amway dude telling people that me and my wife run a small business and I want you to get involved in it because I care about you so much. But still be that groovy guy that's just, experiencing the experience. Yeah. And so like I think it's something that we can dig into, maybe the sort of pendulum esque idea of like getting off the motivational train of like relative self. God, the sanity ship has sailed, and it's not coming
The
back.
sanity ship has sailed. We need some lighthouses. We need to like locate. We need to return to the dock.
Right. If any of that's
Trevor,
compelling, I mean that's all I care about.
Uh, I mean, yeah, definitely like good perspectives on it. And bringing the pendulum into this, like you definitely can see it, and almost like the whole idea of the pendulum is it discredits finding solutions to the problems that exist because of being on this one axis,
Yeah.
which is
right?
exactly what I'm
Yeah.
going to talk about more. But it would be either I'm positively motivated, I'm pulled from above versus pushed from behind, being on the other ends of this pendulum, and outside of that would be like the relative space. Let's backtrack through the mind and just stick to the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Very virtuous. Try to do it, but I got to stick on the pendulum for this one because I think that I have some things that like need to be addressed and figured out before I can focus more on experience,
That's fair.
perhaps. So, from like what you said, yeah, it is. Part of it is it is really natural. Like I said, it's like the sugar. It's the cheap energy.
Mm.
It's not necessarily what's best for you, but it just like it feels most available. Um, and I think about like a lot of stories in the Bible and just like Jesus as a dude and why like so many of those stories are so compelling as you think about like his interactions with like lepers or the blind, people that healthy people are like, get away from me. I don't want to be seen with you. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be around you. I don't want to pick up your conditions. And Jesus was like, here, let me sit with you, let me spend time with you, let me treat you as if we're the same. So this is sticking with the people, everyone else that was like, no, get away from me. There, you're looking at the people below you, and it's like just as compelling to try to get away from that than it is to look at your idols and try to get towards them. um and like I get trapped in this. It feels almost addictive when I like, if I indulge that for a second, I will
Mm-hmm.
slip. If I like see someone, I'm like, oh yeah, that person totally does that like this. That's annoying, man. I hope I'm not like that. And then I'll like go on about whatever I'm doing and be like, just in the back of my head, like, man, fuck that person. Like, I bet this person would do it like that too. You know, like I'll get stuck in that.
Yeah.
And a big thing, you know, with meditation and mindfulness is being able to see the thoughts coming into your head, recognize them, sort of like watch them go, and just, you know, have a little more agency about how to then change the thoughts going forward. And that's really appealing because a lot of times, not a lot of times, there are some specific times when I'm sitting there and my thoughts are just kind of happening to me, and and it's really frustrating when before I was able to really recognize that happening, it was like, whatever, I'm just in a bad mood. But now that I recognize that happening, but I'm not skilled enough to do anything about it, it's really frustrating. I feel like a passenger.
Here's something that might be fun to reflect on. I don't remember where I got it from, but someone talking about meditation where like thoughts were just happening, like they're happening to you, not like necessarily you're thinking, but you're being thought. Like these thoughts are there. You didn't choose them. You didn't pick them. And their thing was like, at some point I noticed through my meditation that these thoughts weren't personal. And that, like the lady in the store saying, finally, when I noticed that, I had the prerogative to choose if I took this thought personally or not. And so you can have a thought that's like, that comes, and the idea of attachment is if you invest your existence with that thought, you know. And our common reaction is, well, I thought it, it's there, I did it, obviously, so it must be me. But when you are doing these meditative practices and you start to feel that pull of like, fuck, these thoughts just won't stop.
Yeah.
And you get that sort of like, oh, these thoughts aren't necessarily personal. It's not necessarily me.
Yeah.
That's something really interesting to like chew on, something to meditate on.
But also with that too is that I think it's interesting that this conversation is also very like sort of inherently sort of like individualistic. Like it's very like focused on the self, as in like what your view on this is, because it's like you responding to like people that you think are toxic or like negative influences or people that you like aspire to be. But it's like it's about you. And it like is kind of like premised on this kind of like static nature of the people around you. Like if we're not thinking about like role models or like
you might want to
anti-role
mind your
models.
clicking with the pen, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Like if we're not talking about like role models or anti-role models, like just like sort of people that you know that you admire or don't admire, like part of it is not just that like, oh, like I do or don't love how this person behaves in this way, is that also like we're all operating in this operation of like motivation and comparing ourselves with each other. And if you kind of understand that like we all are doing this, and as Swat is saying, like we're all kind of like many, if not all of our thoughts are not necessarily just ours, but a sort of like construction of what's around us, of where we're from, who we are, and the people we are around, then there's like certain synergies there, certain like common anxieties there. And I think because of that, and Trevor, you used the word agency of, you know, being able to kind of like choose agency. And Swat, you kind of pushed it forward, and agency.
Oh, gosh.
Side note, that's a sort of like inside bit about some high school thing. Sorry, you guys won't get it. You guys had to be there. But you know, Trevor, you talk about agency in terms of just, you know, like sort of like kind of like trying to emulate the things you want to emulate and pick the things you kind of want to like hold on to, and like Swat, you're kind of pushing it forward in terms of like what thoughts you choose to sort of accept or invest your like energy and like attention to, in which you kind of like dismiss as like, these are here, like I don't have to like hold on to them. We also have the agency to not just like behave as ourselves and try to like formulate ourselves as like avoiding certain things or emulating certain things, but also to influence those people around us. Because if we are looking at other people, people are also looking at us. And perhaps they're avoiding certain tendencies that we hold, but also perhaps admiring certain tendencies that we hold. But regardless of what that is now, oh, sorry, I was clicking. Regardless of like the current state of like, I have X, Y, and Z characteristics that people admire, X, Y, and Z characteristics that people hate. That is the current moment. But you have the agency from now until whatever the end of the timeline is to kind of reflect on, you know, the ones that you like, not just for your own self, but to hopefully like connect with those similar anxieties that other people have. And that perhaps the people around you that you think, oh man, I really hate that they do that, perhaps as they're looking to you, like you can kind of like have some sort of connection there, you know? Like I think that is just kind of like, I think once you understand that people in general are just trying the best they can as humans respond to the things around them and sort of like responding and behaving in just their environments, then it's much easier to both like kind of get less mad at people or like get less frustrated at people when they're just like being annoying or like being rude or whatever. And also perhaps leads you to not just sort of get yourself away from negative motivation, but have the positive motivation, not just for yourself, but for other people to sort of like connect in a certain way and figure out how you can get better alongside other people, not just in comparison to other people. And I think that is kind of complementary to sort of SWAT's, you know, formulation that like, you know, we're all just big babies that have grown larger, you know, like we're all responding and growing. And if we actually like took that to heart and not just been like, oh yeah, like that's true, like aha, LOL, like we're all like growing and we're all like, you know, thrown into this tough world, but actually like, oh, it's not just that, it's just that you, me, and the person down the street are literally all sharing that relationship, of being big babies and being people responding to the things around us. Then you start to get, you know, more personal release from all these like constant like things are like, God, like that guy sucks. Like, or I definitely don't want to be like that. Like, just because like, it's not necessarily like whether it's good or bad to feel that way, but it's just like, it's more on your brain that just doesn't have to be there. Like it's taking capacity and space from just this sort of like idealistic like goal of just trying to like understand the persons around you as sort of being in the same just vat as you are. And because you're all in the same vat, obviously everyone's going to compare themselves against each other because all they have is the people around them to compare themselves to. There's no like golden standard. There's no, you don't have a conception of that. You just know what you don't want to be and what you think you want to be. But like in releasing yourself from that pressure a bit, not only are you like hopefully like being a capital G better or capital B better person. I was gonna say good, but better made more sense in that instance. But you're also freeing things from your brain. You're freeing the negative vibes, but also like you're just giving yourself more capacity to like, as SWAT said, experience. Because experience also takes a lot of capacity, and it takes a like you talk about like, oh, how can you experience if you're always like in this like mode? Well, like that's also the flip side is like if you can acknowledge the sort of common anxiety that we're all going through and these common questions of like, oh, like negative and positive motivations, you just sort of slowly start to combat those in a way and like release yourself. Well, then you have the capacity to try to figure out what it means to experience. And beyond that, maybe just begin experiencing, because like the other stuff is just not taking up as much room in your head rent free of just like, gosh, that guy sucks. Rather, it's like, oh, I wonder why they're behaving that way. I wonder maybe if I'm behaving that way too sometimes. And maybe I'm not. And maybe I feel better for not behaving that way. So maybe how can I sort of connect with this person to see if they're kind of falling into similar things that I fell into previously. It's like Wikipedia. It's like Wikipedia. The golden age of Wikipedia.